Long before Moses was born, Joseph, one of the 12 sons of Jacob, had risen to power in Egypt, becoming second only to Pharaoh. Through Joseph's wisdom, Egypt was saved from a devastating famine. Grateful for his service, Pharaoh invited Joseph's family to settle in the land of Goshen in Egypt. Over the generations, Joseph's descendants, the Israelites, grew numerous and strong, filling the land. However, as time passed, a new Pharaoh came to power, one who did not remember Joseph or the deeds he had done for Egypt. This Pharaoh saw the Israelites' increasing numbers as a threat and feared that they might join Egypt's enemies in times of war. To suppress them, Pharaoh enslaved the Israelites, forcing them to build cities like Pithom and Ramses. But despite the harsh labor, the Israelites continued to multiply. This only increased Pharaoh's fear, leading him to order the killing of every newborn Hebrew boy by throwing them into the Nile River. During this time of oppression, a Levite woman gave birth to a son. Seeing that he was a beautiful child, she hid him for 3 months. When she could no longer conceal him, she made a basket of papyrus, coated it with tar and pitch to make it waterproof, and placed the baby inside. She then set the basket among the reeds along the bank of the Nile River. The baby's sister, Miriam, stood at a distance to watch what would happen. As fate would have it, Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe at the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent one of her maidservants to fetch it. When she opened the basket, she found the crying baby and felt compassion for him. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. At that moment, Miriam approached and asked, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" Pharaoh's daughter agreed, and Miriam fetched her mother, the baby's own mother, to nurse him. Pharaoh's daughter later adopted the child and named him Moses, meaning drawn out of the water. Moses grew up in the Egyptian royal household, but he never forgot his Hebrew roots. One day, when he was grown, Moses went out to observe the forced labor of his people. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. In a fit of anger, Moses killed the Egyptian and hid his body in the sand. The next day, Moses saw 2 Hebrews fighting and tried to intervene, but one of them asked, "Who made you a ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian?" Realizing that his deed was known, Moses feared for his life and fled to the land of Midian. In Midian, Moses sat down by a well. There he encountered the 7 daughters of Jethro, a priest of Midian, who had come to draw water for their father's flock. Some shepherds came along and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them, even watering their flock. When the daughters returned home earlier than usual, Jethro asked, "Why have you returned so early today?" They explained how an Egyptian had rescued them. Jethro invited Moses to stay with them, and in time, Moses married Zipporah, one of Jethro's daughters. Together, they had a son whom Moses named Gershom, saying, "I have become a foreigner in a foreign land." Years passed, and Israelites continued to suffer under slavery. Their cries for help reached God, who remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. One day, while Moses was tending the flocks of Jethro near Mount Horeb, he came across an extraordinary sight, a bush that was on fire but was not consumed by the flames. Curious, Moses approached, and from within the bush, God called out to him, "Moses, Moses." "Here I am," Moses replied. God instructed him to remove his sandals, for the place where he was standing was holy ground. God then revealed himself, saying, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." Moses hid his face, afraid to look at God. The Lord continued, "I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey." God then gave Moses a divine mission to return to Egypt and lead the Israelites out of slavery. But Moses was hesitant, questioning his ability to confront Pharaoh and lead such a large group. God reassured him, saying, "I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain." Moses asked, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you." God also revealed that he would perform wonders in Egypt to compel Pharaoh to release the Israelites, though Pharaoh's heart would be hardened. Still uncertain, Moses expressed his fear that the Israelites would not believe him. In response, God gave Moses miraculous signs to convince them. He told Moses to throw his staff on the ground, and when he did, it became a serpent. Moses recoiled in fear, but God told him to reach out and take it by the tail, and when he did, it turned back into a staff. God also instructed Moses to put his hand inside his cloak, and when he took it out, it was leprous, white as snow. When he put his hand back into his cloak and removed it again, it was restored. Despite these signs, Moses still pleaded with God, saying he was not fluent and slow of speech. So God appointed his brother Aaron to be his spokesperson with Moses to perform the signs. Moses returned to Egypt, met with Aaron, and together they gathered the elders of Israel. Aaron spoke all the words the Lord had given to Moses, and Moses performed the signs before the people, who believed that the Lord had seen their misery and was concerned for them. Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and delivered God's message. "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness." But Pharaoh responded with defiance, saying, "Who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." In his anger, Pharaoh increased the burden on the Israelites, making their labor even harsher. Undeterred, Moses and Aaron returned to Pharaoh, and this time Aaron threw down his staff before Pharaoh, and it became a serpent. Pharaoh's sorcerers and magicians did the same with their staffs, but Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs. Yet Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, and he refused to let the Israelites go. Thus began a series of divine judgments upon Egypt, known as the 10 plagues. First, Moses struck the waters of the Nile with his staff, and the river turned to blood. All the fish died, and the water became undrinkable, but Pharaoh's heart remained hard. Next, God sent a plague of frogs, which swarmed over Egypt, entering houses and beds. Pharaoh pleaded for relief, but once the frogs were gone, he hardened his heart again. Then came the plague of gnats, followed by swarms of flies, which filled the houses of the Egyptians. Still, Pharaoh would not relent. God then struck the Egyptian livestock with a deadly disease, killing their cattle, horses, donkeys, camels, sheep, and goats, but sparing the livestock of the Israelites. Yet Pharaoh's heart was unmoved. God sent a plague of painful boils, affecting both people and animals, followed by a devastating hailstorm that destroyed crops and livestock in the fields. The plague of locusts came next, consuming whatever was left after the hail. Then darkness covered the land for 3 days, a darkness so thick that it could be felt. Despite these overwhelming signs, Pharaoh's heart remained hard. Finally, God declared the last and most terrible plague, the death of the firstborn in every household in Egypt. But to protect the Israelites, God instructed them to sacrifice a lamb without defects and mark their doorposts with its blood. That night, the angel of death passed through Egypt, striking down the firstborn in every Egyptian household, from Pharaoh's palace to the lowliest slave's home, but passing over the homes marked with blood. This event was commemorated by the Israelites as the Passover, a festival to be observed for generations to come. The death of his son broke Pharaoh's will. He summoned Moses and Aaron in the night and ordered them to leave Egypt with all the Israelites, their flocks and herds. The Israelites left in haste, taking unleavened bread, as there was no time for it to rise. God led them out of Egypt in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. But soon after they departed, Pharaoh regretted his decision and pursued the Israelites with his army. The Israelites found themselves trapped between the Egyptian forces and the Red Sea. In their fear, they cried out to God, but Moses reassured them, saying, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." God then instructed Moses to stretch out his staff over the sea. As Moses did so, the Lord sent a strong east wind that blew all night, dividing the waters and turning the sea into dry land. The Israelites began to walk through the sea on dry ground, with walls of water on their right and left. The Egyptians pursued them, but as they reached the middle of the sea, the Lord threw them into confusion. He caused the wheels of their chariots to come off, making it difficult for them to retreat. Realizing the Lord was fighting for Israel, the Egyptians tried to flee, but it was too late. Once the Israelites had safely crossed to the other side, God commanded Moses to stretch out his staff again over the sea. As he did, the waters returned to their place, covering Pharaoh's chariots and his entire army. Not one of the Egyptians survived. The Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, and they feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in his servant Moses. On the other side of the sea, the Israelites broke out in a song of praise, led by Moses and his sister Miriam. They sang of the Lord's triumph, declaring, "I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. Both horse and driver he has hurled into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my defense. He has become my salvation." Miriam took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women followed her, dancing and singing praises to God. This miraculous crossing of the Red Sea marked the true beginning of the Israelites' journey to the Promised Land. They were no longer slaves, but a free people, led by Moses under the guidance of God. The story of their deliverance became a central part of their identity and their faith, a testament to God's power, faithfulness, and his covenant with his people. As they journeyed through the wilderness, they would continue to encounter challenges and witness more of God's mighty works. But the memory of their deliverance from Egypt and the crossing of the Red Sea would forever remind them of God's unfailing love and protection.